Today, we have Natalie Danza, a leader of the adult ballet community online. On this episode, we talk about her journey with ballet, from studying at a conservatory, to becoming a professional Latin dancer, to finding herself in a holistic and healthy way. Enjoy! Well, welcome to the show, Natalie. I am so excited to have a chance to chat with you today all about your adult ballet journey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited because we've been kind of like Instagram friends, but it's always so nice when you get to speak to people who you feel like you know, but you don't actually really know yet. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Totally. It's so funny to be talking to you because I've been seeing you on video for so long and hearing you talk about things and hearing you on YouTube and on Instagram and all of that. So it's like, I feel like I know you, but we haven't actually met.
Yeah, not yet. I want to though. I would love to meet in person one day.
Yeah, that would be so fun. Well, speaking of in person, you've put together some adult ballet holidays where people kind of get together and take class as like a travel thing. How fun is that?
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been such a blessing. I just had the idea, not actually knowing that other people were doing retreats, and I called mine a holiday because I didn't really understand that I should maybe use that language. But anyway, people understood the concept. And we did the first one in Malaga. That would have been 3 years ago, which was so much fun. And I was so grateful for everyone who came on that because it was the first one I'd done as a holiday. And I just had the loveliest people come to that, and they were super supportive and understanding that it was also my first time of running one. But we had loads of fun, and we went and we saw Sleeping Beauty at the theatre, and then we also did some of the variations from Sleeping Beauty. So I tried to have a kind of theme for each holiday. And then the one that we did last year was in Madrid, and that was Don Quixote themed, which is obviously set in Spain, so it was kind of perfect. So yeah, they've just been amazing, and it's such a great opportunity for me to meet people in the community, and they actually have traveled. Some people came from the States. It was amazing because I was like, this will probably be more Europe people because it's easy-ish to get to Spain from Europe. But I was amazed that people came from all over the place, which was it was so cool. It was so nice. And as well as for me getting to meet people and dance together, one of the other beautiful things about it was just seeing how people made lifetime friendships at the holidays, which has been just so beautiful as well. So yeah, super grateful that people took the chance to come to the first one, and then once it was established, people have been excited. I had to cancel the one this year because of COVID. Yeah, it was supposed to be this week, actually. It was supposed to be on right now in Cyprus, but it's okay. Everyone obviously understood that we couldn't do it, and I'm excited to set up another one as soon as we can.
It's so fun to take ballet in other places. I think one of my favorite things about ballet and music and the arts is that there's no language. I mean, it's cross culture, right? So it's
yeah.
Even though we're from different places, we have this shared language. We use the same words to describe everything. You can take class from people who you don't speak the same language of, and you can still understand it. That's just the coolest thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. It's honestly so much fun. And I've had people come and visit me. So my friend Deborah, for example, she came to Madrid and she took a class. Obviously that class was in Spanish. Obviously I teach in English, but that class was in Spanish. And as you said, there's no problem because the words are French, so everyone recognizes them. And even if you didn't, even if you're a complete beginner and you don't know the words, the movement of the body, like you said, it's a universal language. So it's so special. It really is.
It's so cool. And I think as adult dancers, ballet is our leisure activity, right? I mean, leisure is a funny word for it because it's not leisurely at all, but it's our leisure activity. And so to combine, I loved that you call it a holiday because that's what it is for us. It's not work. It's not hard work. It's not stressful. It's just we get to go play in a new place and go play in ballet class.
Yeah, and that's exactly been my philosophy on ballet, especially for the last few years. Maybe it wasn't. It's been a shift for sure, but shifting from that idea of it being a very goal-oriented thing, for me at the beginning when I started, it certainly was in a way, or it quickly transitioned into being that. And then I realized that as you just said there, like the joy is in the doing of it. It's not about, you know, you can only enjoy it when you get your double pirouette. No, you enjoy it from the beginning. And I think that's something that I've really tried to include now, like both in my own dance journey and also as a teacher now. I try and include that for my students, so that it's not about beating yourself down when things aren't going well. Like, you acknowledge it, but you also enjoy the things that you're doing really well, and, you know, praise me when it's myself, and praise my students for that as well, because I think it's really important, especially in ballet, as you know. Like, it's so hard. You have to be, like, stay kind of positive and yeah, the little, celebrating the little wins, because they do seem little, I think, in ballet.
They do seem very little, but they're huge. They're a little, like your leg turns out a little bit more, it's progress. So, you know, ballet attracts generally pretty driven people. I'm sure you have that in your ballet community there as well. You know, we tend to be more type A, more intense careers, more intense goal-oriented people. And so how do we reconcile that, like, pre-existing mindset with what you're talking about with ballet, which is so, it can be taken as so literal and goal-oriented? How do we deal with that?
Yes, it's such a good question, and it's something that I definitely struggled with. And like, I think I've been on a whole journey with it. But as you said, it's not just the mindset when you come to ballet class. It's not like you put that mindset on as you step into ballet class. Like, it's the mindset for a lot of us.
The whole thing, yeah.
So yeah, exactly. And as you said, it does attract people who are driven, hardworking, all of those things, because those are the things that you need to kind of get good at ballet. You need to work hard. There's no other way around it. So, but the shift is in the enjoying the hard work, and then not seeing it so much as work as like passion, I guess. So I mean, for me personally, it's been thinking about the mindset outside of ballet as well as in ballet. So I don't know, I just started to do kind of a lot more work on my inner world, I guess. Like, you know, all of these terms now are kind of, I don't know, becoming more popular and things, and I try not to get too like spiritual about it or anything, but I think I really started to realize that, as you said, this is not just about how I am in the dance studio, it's how I am in life, and how do I actually want to show up. And so I want to show up, as I said, kind of constantly judging myself. I think that was maybe for me one of the breakthroughs, was realizing how judgmental I was to myself, and therefore to other people sometimes also. And like judging my own ballet, and judging my own technique, and judging my progress, and just constantly judging, basically. And I think at one point, like, so while I was at the conservatoire, I was struggling with all of that. I was at the conservatoire for a year. I mean, we can talk about that. But I think after that, and when I decided that my journey wasn't going to be trying to become a professional ballet dancer, and I'd accepted it, and that was also a process for me. But then deciding that, well, if that isn't the goal, then why on earth am I really like being so hard on myself? And surely if this is where I'm going, and like, it just became a kind of acceptance thing of like, I want to improve, and I will carry on working hard to improve, but it doesn't have to be like a specific moment where like, okay, at this point when I get into this company, because that was never going to happen at that point. So then it was kind of like, how do I learn to enjoy this and not judge myself all the time, and not think that I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough if I don't do a double pirouette that day, or if I can't hold my balances on point, or if I can't, you know, and start to, I think, separate myself as an adult dancer, and that kind of being my identity from my actual dancing, and just enjoying the dancing, if that makes sense. That was a very muddled, lots of different thoughts at the same time. I hope people could get something out of that.
Well, I think there's a really important point that you're making that I want to pull out and kind of dig into specifically, which is the difference between wanting to be better and being good enough already. So by good enough, I mean good enough as a person, as a human being, as a dancer, as like a whole person. Like, we often equate, I can't turn out my legs, therefore I'm not a good person. Like, our mentality can sometimes get to that, whereas like, I can't turn out my legs because I'm a human being and I'm working towards getting them to turn out like that. How can we change that thought process? Is that kind of where you're going with some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's acknowledging where you are on your journey as well. Like that's so important, the acceptance part that I mentioned and that you're talking about there, which is we didn't, or even if we did train as like youngsters, or even if we did carry on, and especially if you didn't and you had a big break and then you came back to it, the expectations have to shift. Like they have to for our mental health, because otherwise we have a standard that's like it's not realistic, and it doesn't have to be that it's only at that standard that you're allowed to enjoy the ballet and you're allowed to think yourself worthy, as you said. So it's acknowledging where you're on your own journey. I think that translates also into the dance studio, especially if you're in group classes, to not compare and to remember that you are on your own journey, and why are you looking at that person over there who's got their leg higher when they've been dancing 3 years longer than you or whatever. So it's like acknowledging and accepting where you are and then working from there, because otherwise it's too much resistance, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to it took me a long time too to reconcile the fact that I wanted to continue improving, but I should be nicer to myself along the journey. I sort of felt like if I wasn't super judgmental and critical of myself, I wouldn't have the drive to keep going, and wasn't sure where that motivation was going to come from if this wasn't what was happening.
Yes, 100%. And that comes back to that personality type you were talking about before. And that was the driving force for a lot of the things that I've done, and probably for you the same. Like in school, the drive was always get that grade. So it was the end result, whatever other different things, like that's the goal, that end point. And I'm like judging myself and pushing myself so that I get there, and not knowing another way, not knowing that really there was another way. And then at some point, I think realizing that maybe that way did push me, and people might have different opinions on this, it might have pushed me to get like 100%, but this new way that I'm doing things, I feel like maybe it's getting me like 90% of the results, but it's getting me 100% of the enjoyment along the way, as opposed to getting 100% of the results and like 10% enjoyment. So for me, that's definitely worth it. But I don't know, some people might even say that the results are better. That's probably still the judgmental part of me being like, but you know, my flexibility was a bit better then than it is now because I'm not doing da.
Right.
But just in terms of mental health and enjoyment, and just coming from a place of pure joy towards ballet instead of the other side of it, I think is worth it for me anyway.
It's a huge transition, and I think many of us are faced with it right now, having had to leave the studios for a couple of months. I think there's so much pressure on ourselves to practice in the perfect environment. I cannot practice unless my teacher is watching me. I cannot practice unless it's perfect. I cannot practice unless I'm as flexible as it was. I cannot practice if I don't have enough space or if I don't have the perfect floor, because we're always so judgmental of ourselves. And I think a lot of us have had to come to accept it on such a greater level for the last couple of months, of like accepting that you can still do stuff even if it's not in the perfect place.
Yes, absolutely. And I think being able to also be okay with the regression, that's such a big life lesson. And it's a lesson that I learned when I left the conservatory and I stopped dancing for like 4 or 5 hours every single day, and I went back to just doing like a normal adult class either every day or sometimes missing a day, and noticing certain things decrease. Other things increase, like musicality and expression things, because there's a different environment in adult ballet class, which I love it so much. But to be able to become being okay with those things, and like you said, in this moment right now, yes, when we go back in the studio, our Grand Allegro is not going to be the same as it has been, but to be able to accept it and be okay with it and still love yourself and still say it's still worth dedicating time to doing what I can now in preparation for that, and then being kind to yourself when you do see the lower grand jeté in the mirror when we get back to it.
We're really being forced to work on that mindset right now, I would say. I mean, this work on the mindset will help us in the future. You see this with not just with COVID, but with injuries. So professionals or any of us have gone through injuries. We feel the same thing. I really equate this feeling to that feeling of injury. So it's easy if you've got an injured ankle to be like, I can't work on anything. And it's like, well, you can still lay on the floor and do core work. You can still work on port de bras, but it's finding the motivation when you feel like everything is lost to still find what you can actually work on and be more surgical about it.
So true.
So tough.
It's tough.
So
That is important work.
well, it's maybe perhaps the most important work for all of us to be doing right now at this time, because discouragement and wanting to leave ballet is rampant throughout the adult ballet community. So people getting discouraged, this beating yourself up at the end of your day, it can make ballet very stressful. And so perhaps the work that we're all doing collectively over these 2 months will help us through the next time we have a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, let's back up and talk a little about your dance journey. I know we just got right into what was on the top of the mind, which is amazing, and I love it. But let's back up a little bit and give some context to what's going on. So tell me about the beginnings of your ballet journey.
Sure, I'm gonna do like a very fast version because I mean, I have the full version on my YouTube channel. I think it's like 15 minutes long, so we'll spare everyone that version.
Great.
But
We'll link to that YouTube video as well in case anyone wants to watch your whole story. But we'll do the abridged version today, and we'll link everyone to that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and then we can dive into bits that might be more interesting that I didn't go into in that thing. So I think like probably some people in the adult ballet community can relate to. I danced ballet as a little kid, like very little kid. I think I started when I was 3, really loved it, was doing all the fun parts of ballet, you know, and then just by coincidence, I was living in Scotland, and then my parents moved back down to England. So when I moved to England, I didn't find a ballet teacher that I liked, and I stopped. I didn't stop dancing, but I stopped ballet, and it was so funny because I was 9 years old, but I told my mum, I was like, I don't like this teacher, I don't want to do it. And I don't really know, like, why is a 9-year-old making that decision? But anyway, I did. So then I just carried on doing other dance styles. It was kind of more like commercial type, contemporary stuff, nothing even close to professional stuff at that point, because it was just for fun, just like, you know, school shows, little groups, all of that kind of thing. But I always just enjoyed any kind of dancing. And then I remember when I was choosing my GCSEs, I'm sorry, because that doesn't translate into any other countries, but it's like the ones that you choose when you're between 14 and 16 years old. Dance was an option at my school, which was amazing. So I did that, and it was kind of contemporary stuff. And then A-level, which is that college? No.
What age?
That's 16 to 18.
That's like end of high school, we would say.
End of high school, okay.
Yeah.
So then there was like another course that was also dance, so I did that, and then I decided to I wanted to apply to both universities to study dance, and I also applied to some of the conservatoires, and this was contemporary, so I hadn't been doing ballet at this point. So I realized that my technique wasn't good enough because I hadn't been going to a proper dance school. I'd just been doing it in school, and it was more choreography focused, theory, like we did some performance stuff as well, but it was much more the study of dance as a whole thing rather than just like honing the body to be on stage, and I hadn't done that work, and that was my problem. So I didn't actually get into any of the conservatoires I applied to, and that was a big like punch in the face at that point, and realizing actually that it doesn't take like just talent. You can't just have talent, is not enough in anything. And I think that was a hard lesson to learn at that age, because I'd gotten through quite a lot of things in my life, partly because of the type A personalities we talked about, but also lots of things had felt like they'd come naturally to me, which it was the wrong mentality to have. It was really the wrong mentality to have. So I learned that lesson then, and I was like, no, hard work is a very important part of things as well, and don't underestimate it. And like dedicating the hours to the things, like you have to do it. So anyway, I studied dance at uni, at university, so that's different to a conservatoire obviously, because then you're studying again dance as a whole thing, as like history, theory. That I did a lot of choreography. I've always really enjoyed improvising and choreography in contemporary, and that was when I started the Latin stuff. So I did salsa, samba, reggaeton, some merengue. I just really got into the Latin stuff. And anyway, long story short, I ended up being a professional samba dancer in the UK and teaching samba and other Latin styles after I graduated. And because by then I'd learned the lesson of work really hard at the things that you really love. So I sacrificed some of the time that I probably should have been spending on, writing better essays and stuff, on dancing, on training in like the Latin styles and things. But anyway, it all worked out in the end. So I did that. And then again, long story short, moved to Madrid 8 years ago, joined a dance school where they had salsa and samba, because that's what I wanted to be dancing. And they also had a ballet class. And I was like, yes, do you know what? I'm going to do a class, because I mean, I've always loved watching ballet. I think ballet, especially like if you are very into classical music as well, because like I also play the cello. So there's something very special about ballet just as an art form, even though I wasn't doing it, that it always had like a very special place in my heart. So I was like, let me just go back, let me just do a few classes. If anything, it'll probably just be good for my flexibility and strength. And then of course, as many people can relate to, I know, I got addicted. Yeah, and so I trained for, and when I say addicted, like I was teaching English at that time, so I didn't speak very good Spanish. That was what I was doing here. And so literally in the hours that I wasn't teaching, I was dancing ballet at the dance school. And I was training 6 days a week then. Like I used to go on Saturdays as well. And one of my teachers said to me, he was like, Natalie, why don't you audition for the conservatoire? And I was like, I don't know. In the moment, he was like, he told me, I was like, really? Like, could I do that? And then as soon as he put the idea in my head, I couldn't get it out again. So I was like, oh my God, this was like maybe the unfulfilled thing of when I didn't train at the conservatory for temporary, like maybe it was supposed to be that I did it now with ballet or whatever. I still had that chip on my shoulder probably. So I went to the audition. Like obviously I trained for a few more months after that before applying. And then knowing I was going to do that, and I got in. So, thank you so much to that conservatoire who was open-minded enough to let an adult ballet dancer in, because I was 25 or 26, I think. And yeah, they were very open-minded, and it was a great experience, but it was also an extremely intense experience. I was still working, obviously, while I was training. And it was quite a lot. It was quite a lot, and also because at the conservatoire, obviously, they're training people to become professional ballerinas. Like it was not even the kind of more intense training in an academy where it's a little bit of both. This was like we're little ballet robots, basically. And some of the joy started to be taken away then, and I think that's where that mentality that we were talking about before of the goal oriented stuff it really took over, because that was how it was in a way. And I was forcing my turnout. I was improving very quickly, because obviously the quality of the teaching, the hours that I was dancing, all of that was improving very quickly, but it was too quick for my body as an adult. And so I sustained like quite a bad hip injury that just wouldn't go away, just from forcing my turnout. And it was one of those things I just remember waking up in the morning and I couldn't walk. I don't think I've told this story very much, but I couldn't walk in the morning. Like my hips were like frozen. It felt like they were frozen. And like really painful. And I remember like I would have to very, very slowly get out of bed, like walk very, very gently, like otherwise I would fall over because they were like frozen still. And then by the end of like the breakfast, I was kind of okay. And then by the time I'd warmed up in the studio, I was absolutely fine. And it was this very weird thing that like when I was warmed up and the adrenaline was going, I could dance through it. I could dance through the pain, and I did for a long time. And that was also a lesson in injury prevention and listening to your body and taking things as they come, rather than again rushing towards the goal. Right. Like there's no rush. It's not. Yeah. So anyway, that happened. It was an amazing year. I learned a lot. Apart from the injury, it was really hard but amazing year. And I took all these lessons of things that get neglected in adult ballet classes sometimes, because they don't always. It obviously very much depends on the teacher, but sometimes I think they don't demand as much from adult dancers, whereas actually we're very capable. And I don't mean demanding things like perfect tenor or anything, but even just focusing on like lines, that's something that I personally like, I love, because I don't know, it's just something that I've always enjoyed, finding the nice line and like working on that. And I think sometimes with adult dancers, they think, oh, because I don't have perfect turnout, I'll never get nice lines, but it's not true. Like, you can work with what you have. So I don't know, just little lessons that I took from there. And then when I decided that I wasn't going to continue, I took back into the studio with me for my adult ballet classes, and just tried to honour those little things that I'd learnt there and carry on, but now in a totally different environment. And since I left, like I said, that was the mindset shift of, I'm really doing this because I enjoy it now, and not because I'm trying to get anywhere or do anything specific. So I still had to set myself some of my own goals sometimes. That was still because I still had a bit of that mentality left over, and it would just help me to focus a little bit more in class. But more recently, I've just been going and enjoying it. And like, if what I feel like that day is I want to work on musicality, or I want to work on my arms today or whatever, and going with like a more general goal rather than beating myself that like, oh, I haven't gotten my triple pirouette yet or whatever. So that's a very quick version.
Isn't it funny how winding all of our journeys are with ballet, especially as adults? We piece things together here and there. We have like a very winding journey, both in our own minds and in the studio as well. Yeah. I want to dig into a couple of things within there. Were you kind to yourself when you were a teenager in these dance classes that weren't ballet? Did the non-ballet environment change your mindset, or did you still have that mindset of like, I have to be better, I'm not good enough yet? Do you recall?
That's a really good question. I think because the focus was much more on, not on performance or technique. Like I said, it was very much more like contemporary and that kind of focus. It was slightly different. Like I said, I was still always goal oriented on getting high grades. And so I knew what I needed to do within the like dance curriculum to get those grades, but there was still quite a lot of wiggle room, because that's just one grade, and there's a lot of ways that you can get there, rather than with technique where it's right or wrong and that's it.
Black and white.
So but for some reason it didn't necessarily translate into ballet. I think just because of the movement vocabulary of ballet, and because it is so precise, whereas within the contemporary stuff that I was doing, and it's not true for all contemporary, like people who have studied Graham and cutting of technique and everything, like they know there is a very specific technique also, but that wasn't my journey in contemporary. So I think in that way, but it was compartmentalized. It's so funny that you just asked me that. Like I haven't even thought about that connection yet, but I didn't think to bring that more experimental or creative thing to ballet, because I think ballet, as it's introduced to most people, is rigid. Right. And it's changing now a lot, but I think there's still that underlying thing of ballet being, this is ballet, this is how it's done, there is no other way, and you have to, do it like that. Where obviously there's, sorry.
How about with the Latin? Was it the same with the Latin dance?
Oh no, Latin was, well, this is very interesting actually. So Latin stuff is very much, if you do ballroom in Latin, I know it's different. That also is very technical, but the Latin stuff that I do is, like, I guess it's in its original form. So like samba from Brazil is not the same as like ballroom in Latin samba, the same as the salsa that I dance, which is danced in, like originally danced in New York or like Cuba. Is different to the more codified and technical stuff that's done on the ballroom floor. So again, I was focused on like learning the steps and getting good quickly, like that never leaves me. But it was a different type of pressure, and it was much more enjoyment, and I think probably that is why I ended up doing Latin, those styles professionally. I think because there was so much joy there for me, and it wasn't technique focused, and so I was mentally able to process it much better. And yeah, honestly, there was just a lot of joy and enjoyment there. But interestingly, I wanted to mention this in the partner dances. If anyone else has done salsa, you'll know, not ballroom salsa, but salsa where it's completely improvised on the dance floor, so there's no choreography, and you as the female, usually in traditional roles, you have to learn to follow. And it was something that I could not do for the longest time, because I would be like, this is count one, why are you dancing like on count two? Or yeah, like you're supposed to move your arm like this, so I can do that. And it took me a very, very, very long time to relinquish the control of that. And that taught me a lot about myself as a dancer and as a person, and the fact that I couldn't let go of the control, and I couldn't do it what was wrong in my head of like not dancing on the right count. So it taught me a lot, and I'm very, very grateful to salsa and bachata for that life lesson. Sure.
So many of us as dancers, as ballet dancers specifically, so we've talked about the ballet dancer archetype. I mean, obviously not everyone's in that boat, but especially because adult dancers, we self-select very much for the ballet world. So we feel like a lot of times that any practice in dance that is not ballet is a waste of time, or that if we took 2 years off to learn tap, that would be a waste of time and our ballet would be reset to zero. What do you think about that?
I have to disagree with that. Because as much as, for example, taking a break, I mean, I haven't taken, since I started again when I was 25, I haven't taken a longer break than I think 2 months, one summer, and that was the summer that my hip finally healed. Only when I took 2 months properly off, instead of doing my fake, like, I'm going to rest for a week and then I'm back, and
Right.
Anyway. And of course at the beginning you go back you have those few classes where you're like, why did I stop? But then after a few more classes, everything's back, and you're working again, and like the things are still in there, the alignment is still in there. Even sometimes I remember after taking a break, pirouettes would actually be easier.
Yep.
I don't know, because I wasn't tensing, or something had shifted, but the alignment and the memory of what position I should be in was still there somehow. And I was like very happy when I figured that out. I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So I'm allowed to take a bit of time off and it'll still be there. So I think in that way, some time off is always good if it's necessary. And then in terms of the other dance stuff, like I remember at the conservatoire them saying don't do other dance styles, and I remember them even telling one guy who like was going skiing that he shouldn't be going skiing and it's very dangerous and blah blah blah. So obviously that's a different environment, but I think for me personally, you have to, and it's kind of what I said before about the percentages thing, where if you want 100% just pure improvement in ballet, there will be some things that are not gonna, I don't know, some, what's the word I'm looking for? Compromises. There will be some compromises, but for me, like dancing Latin stuff, the amount that it gives me mentally and also physically and just as a human being, just that reconnecting to that pure joy, that it's a different type of joy than ballet. Ballet is more like serene beauty, elegance, but I get to connect to a different side of myself when I'm dancing Latin stuff. And to be honest, maybe it does affect my turnout 10%. Maybe it does. Maybe because of the wiggling of the hips and like loosening all those muscles around there, like maybe it does. But for me, at this point in my life, and I think that's the decisions that you just have to make individually, and it's not going to be the same for everyone. But for me, I'm willing to lose a few little things in ballet to gain a whole other side of my life. So that's how I rationalize it, I guess, for myself. But the very, very, very small differences that I've seen since I left the conservatoire and I've been doing other dance styles at the same time as ballet, are so worth it. They're so worth it because I can still have nice lines even if my turnout is slightly less. I can still dance with, I don't know, with what I consider to be nice movements, that maybe my leg's not as high or whatever, but for me, it's worth it to have that balance in other things.
Has it given you anything? Has it given you anything for your ballet? The other styles?
I think it keeps me. I think if I'd have only carried on dancing ballet, I would have maybe fallen out of love with it at points, and then I'm sure I would have fallen back in love with it because it's ballet at the end of the day. But I think it gives me the breathing space. I think it's like the same in a relationship. Like if you spend 100% of the time with your partner, and I've been with Jordan for 7 years, so like I'm just thinking of the parallel with this. If you spend 100% of your time with that one person, even if you love them, even if they're the love of your life, and so even if ballet is like, it's your thing, it's your match made in heaven, it's your soulmate, like, it's still healthy to see your friends, to see your family, to do other things, and then you come back to that person with like a renewed interest and excitement because you haven't like been with, and this is like the perfect time to remember that because we've all been in lockdown with our partners with it all this time. So it's like, it's healthy to have time away, and that doesn't have to be a different dance style. It could be pottery, it could be playing a musical instrument, it could be, you know, just something else. But I think it is healthy, especially when it's not your job, like, you know, we're not professionals, that would be, I guess, a different thing. But in our case, I think it is nice to have a little bit of something else to give you space and to like I said, I think it's even more about finding a different side of your own identity that then you can bring into that. So I'm sure also, just in a more practical way, I'm sure that in some of the Latin stuff, I think that has, when I've allowed myself to bring it into the ballet, because for a long time I was like, everything is very, very separate, and this is ballet Natalie, and she doesn't mix with like Latin Natalie, and everything was, yeah, very compartmentalized, and I was very robotic when I left the conservatory in my ballet. Like, I was very like position, everything super square, aligned, But then I think when I did allow myself to bring a little bit of the fire that comes out when I'm dancing Latin, then you can use that when you allow yourself to start merging those things. But it feels scary at the beginning, or it did for me anyway.
So you talk, I love that you talk so much about your, you know, the deep soul searching you've done through this period of time. And I know that you have spent a lot of time in the last few years figuring out how to serve other adults like you. I mean, I almost said dancers, but we're dancers and we are humans and we are people, you know, we are all of those things. So tell me a little bit about what you've learned through the process and what you've tried to serve, to kind of give back to your community.
Yeah, so I think what I was talking about before of the actually being demanding from adult ballet dancers, but in a very positive and encouraging way. I think that's the thing that I've tried to bring the most, because realizing for myself, like I've told this story on my YouTube channel at different points, but I remember in those first classes going to the bar, putting my leg on the bar when we were supposed to be doing bar stretches, looking at the girls either side of me with this beautiful turnout and my leg in perfect parallel because I hadn't danced ballet, like everything I'd done was in parallel, and being like, my leg will never look like that, and just being like, okay, I mean, well, I'll just carry on dancing, I guess, because I'm really enjoying it, but I just couldn't see that thing of like, I will never be able to do that. And I think lots of people have that also with point and being like, I love that, looking at people do that, but I will never be able to do that. And I think it's just giving people, I mean, the message I want to send is like, you know, there are no limits on what you can do in your own body. There might be limits in terms of like getting into a company, going on stage, all those, you know, like professionally, but there's no limits for you inside of your own body, if that makes sense. So it's really giving that message has been so important for me, and reminding people that you don't have to, as an adult, be good at all the things that you do. There was this weird thing of like, when you're a kid, it's fine to try different things, it's fine to be a beginner, it's fine to mess around with this and that and whatever, and then suddenly as an adult it's like you're supposed to know what you're doing all the time. But no, like, try different things, like go out of your comfort zone. And I think moving to Spain really taught me that, and that's probably also what allowed me to go back into that ballet studio, especially, and this used to be very hard for me, but especially because I identified as a dancer, because I had been a professional dancer in a different style, and it really took a lot for me to swallow my pride and go into that dance studio having my identity as a dancer but being so bad at ballet. And that was really hard, and I think that's also a nice message that I like to remind people of, that it's okay to be a beginner and it's okay to be not good at something, because as we said before, you're still good enough as a person, you're good enough for like where you are right now on your journey. So I love to remind people of that. And I think, yeah, as a teacher, just for me, it's encouragement, and it's also demanding, and it's finding the balance between those two things. Like, you want to make sure that people are still feeling positive about their own potential, but not pulling them too fast or too hard, but then also not letting them get too complacent where they're like, yeah, whatever, and now I'm not really trying and I'm just kind of doing whatever, you know, it's a fine line in a way, but it's fun to find that with different people also, because every student is different, which is what I've loved about this time being able to teach private online classes. It's been super fun because then you really get to know the individual and what their little things are, and how much they can cope with in terms of pushing them, and when to take a little bit of a slower class. So that's been really, really fun, and I'm very, very grateful for the people that I've been able to work with, because everybody in the adult ballet community they're just so hardworking and they love ballet. So that's such a joy, I think, as well, to share that.
It really is, and it's very like you said, there's a balance of pushing and hardworking while accepting where you're at, and kind of working through that. And as dancers, that changes for us. You know, as you grow and learn, you can take on more and more into this life as you open your mind and as you kind of accept some of these things. And so it's fun as a teacher to see people grow in that way as well, and kind of grow outside the studio too, because as we've been talking about, this mindset carries over into your life. So not being good at something or being a beginner at something applies to so many areas of life. Being new at something.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal.
True. Yeah. As an entrepreneur, like, I have to remind myself of that also. It's like, you know, for the first time when I have to learn how to build a website, or the first time I have to learn how to manage my finances, do my taxes, whatever it is, it's like you're so outside of your comfort zone, but you just have to be like, okay, step by step. I don't need to know everything right now, and just be okay with not knowing, and then asking for help, which is another lesson that I learned too late in life, to be honest. I wish I'd like figured it out earlier and stopped trying to do everything myself. But yeah, the power of like asking for help, and then also like collaborating, that took me a long time as well, because I was so focused on like, I need to get my own stuff done, and like busy. And again, that was all just a story in my head. Like, there's no truth to that. And then when you finally start to release all these limiting beliefs, and you realize that actually this is about enjoying things, learning, and then in the community in a different way, like through collaborations, which is why I'm super grateful that I'm talking to you now, because I think it's something that I didn't appreciate the value of enough for a while, because I was too focused on like, yeah, my own dancing and my own journey and stuff. And now I've got to the point where I really appreciate that and understand the power that it has.
Yeah, the community is a huge part of it, and what kind of helps us through the hard times. You know, we're here for each other, and we're all in it together. We're all in the same boat. You know, we're all in the same ocean. We're maybe in our own boats, but we're all in the same in the same situation. I want to ask you one last question. I always like to ask kind of your message that you want to put out. So what, for, let's say for someone who's in the middle of their dance journey, maybe they've gotten started already and they're feeling a little bit discouraged, how would you encourage them to kind of find who they are, become a whole person, keep going through their dance journey? What advice would you have for them to leave them with?
Okay, the first thing that came to mind is check that you're in the right class. Because like we said before with the balance, check that you're either not in a class that's become way too easy for you now, so you feel like you're losing motivation with your own dancing, but it's actually because you're not being challenged. Or the other way, check that you're not in a class where it's actually overwhelmed and you can't, and when you're overwhelmed, it's very difficult to enjoy stuff as well. So check that you're in the right class, check that you're in a class if you can. Obviously this is like, you know, ideal situation with a teacher who you resonate with or you feel like there's a good vibe with, because I think as well in ballet, I think we all know, like depending on the teacher, it can be a very different experience in class. So finding that teacher that will help and support you in those moments where you're feeling like, meh, this is not like my day or whatever, and that will just kind of allow you to be and give you the support when you need it. I think that's really important. And then I think for yourself, something that I've done because of Instagram, but I don't know if I would have done it otherwise, is to sometimes just film yourself and you'll see different things. But I think for me, it's really nice as I have this whole catalogue of like going back and being like, oh yeah, I didn't used to be able to do that, because as we said before, the steps in ballet are so slow, and it's sometimes you don't notice them. I feel like it's like with parents when they're like, look at their kid and they're like, when did you get so big? It's the same with ballet, and like you don't notice the progress as it's going because it is quite repetitive in a way. It's also the beauty of it in a way, because you really get to like hone in. But in some ways, video is a great way for that. If you have a different way of doing it, of just like remembering a certain time and how you felt in that time and what you were able to do, then that's important. But I think, yeah, acknowledging your progress and taking the time to celebrate the little things as they come, as we said at the beginning, is something that can really encourage you. And then, as we also said, if you do feel like you need a break, also don't feel pressure to be like, oh, because it's ballet and because ballet is the thing that you have to do, and it's like, again, it's like becomes your identity. I'm an adult ballet dancer, so I have to dance ballet, and if I'm not dancing ballet, then who am I? You know, don't get into that trap either. And if you do feel like, right now I could do with like a 2-month break and I'm going to explore this other thing that could be completely, it could be a different dance style, it could be something completely different, and then you may very well find, because I know people who've done this, and then you miss it with all your heart and you're like, I can't wait to get back in the dance studio. So I think that's the other thing, just be kind to yourself, listen to yourself, trust your intuition more. I think it's something that we get talked out of sometimes because we're supposed to be on this path, and like you're supposed to just do ABC instead of like listening to how you're actually feeling. Because in the end, if ballet is supposed to be in your life, you will come back to it. And if it's not, that's also okay. Like, it's also not to say like you have to do this thing, as we said, because it's like your identity or whatever, or because you see it as the highest of all the dance forms or whatever. For me, I'm very much of a like, every dance has its beautiful things and its challenges also, and it's not about making it into a hierarchy, but just finding what works for you as a person.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's so much, I love that we've talked so much today about the whole person. You know, this episode is about ballet, but also just about you and about you as a human being, and about, you know, you as who you want to become in life, and how you want to be a holistic person, and not just a series of compartments, how you want to connect everything together in your life, and use ballet as a tool to become a better dancer and a better person. It's a wonderful message.
I love it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. What a fun chat. I'm really excited that we were able to have this conversation today. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. And when I'm coming to the US, which is definitely on my list, like I would love to meet up and dance together.
That would be so fun. That would be so fun. Maybe we can have a New York City holiday.
Yes.
Thanks for listening today, dancers. For more adult ballet, you can follow our studio on Instagram and Facebook at Broche Ballet. You can follow me on Instagram at Julie the Ballerina, or check out our blog and YouTube channels for even more content. You can also dance with us in our online studio. To have your story featured on our podcast, email us at hello@brocheballet.com. Today's show was produced by Jackie Dohleman. I'm Julie Gill, and this was Broche Banter. Happy dancing!